Our first witness this morning wishes to be known as Gaynor, does she?
Yes, sir.
Gaynor, please.
Please state your full name
Gaynor Lewis.
and repeat after me. I do solemnly, sincerely,
I do solemnly and sincerely
and truly declare and affirm
and truly declare and affirm
that the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Gaynor, you're here to talk about your late husband, Hayden,
Yeah.
and also about what happened to you. And we're going to put a photo up on the screen. It's 2368003. It should come up in front of you. And that's a photo of Hayden and of you. You and Hayden married in 1975,
Yeah.
but you'd grown up on the same street. And you had two sons, Stephen and Paul. Can you tell us a little about what Hayden was like?
He was a happy, hard-working, fun-loving man. He liked horse racing, going to Cheltenham, backgammon. He liked socialising. He was great. He was lovely. Yeah.
He'd been diagnosed with haemophilia at a very young age,
Yeah.
about the age of 2, as had his brother Gareth.
Yes.
And we're going to hear some more about Gareth later from Gareth and Hayden's sister, Bev, who's sitting with you. Hayden left school at 16, but he successfully created a business for himself as a carpenter.
Yes.
And did he devote a lot of time to building up that business?
Yes, he did. It was something he really enjoyed, and working with wood. And I knew we'd never be rich because he was always helping other people, you know, with the work that he did. Yeah, he enjoyed it.
As a child, for his haemophilia, Hayden used to receive a lot of treatment in hospital when he had a bleed.
Yeah.
And he once, when he was about 11, counted up the number of times he'd been in hospital. And how many was it?
I think he said something about 66 times by then.
And he received, as far as you're aware, mostly cryoprecipitate during those
Yes.
years. And his care was at Cardiff Royal Infirmary and then at the University Hospital of Wales under the care of Professor Bloom.
That's right.
There then came a point when Hayden started to receive factor VIII products. And he also developed an inhibitor to factor VIII.
Yes.
And that meant he used to have to get high dosages of the products.
Yes.
And then he began to receive home treatment.
Yes. I think that was the late 1970s.
But we're going to look at some dates because I'm going to ask for some records to go up on screen, Gaynor. Paul, can we have 2368004, please? This is an extract from the records of the National Haemophilia Database. And if we go to the second page, please, Paul. And we go down towards the bottom of the page. We can see there, starting in 1969 and 1970, we've got cryoprecipitate, then fresh frozen plasma cryoprecipitate, and then we see factor products being introduced. There's a reference there in 1974 to Dr. Krask's research work. And then we have factor VIII being in 1977. And if we then just see the whole sheet again, please, Paul. We can see that over the years from the late 1970s throughout the 1980s, Hayden received a range of different products, factor VIII, Travenol Highland Haemophil factor VIII, Humanate, Cryobulin, Cutter factor VIII, Co8, Profilate, and the BPL factor VIII. So predominantly commercial products.
I didn't know that Hayden was being researched in 74. I only found that out last week.
And we'll see from a letter that Hayden asked questions about that of UK HGDO at a later stage. As far as you know, Was Hayden ever told that there was or might be a risk of infection associated with the use of those products?
No. Hang on. He was told that he may get a jaundice, but it was underplayed, I think. It was nothing but, you know, you might feel ill for a short time, but no, it was underplayed, I think.
And do you know whether there was any discussion with him ever about the choice of products or why one product would be used rather than another at any particular time? In 1985, Hayden received a call from Professor Bloom asking him to go and see him.
Yes.
What can you tell us about that?
Well, he went up there and he phoned me and said, I've just been told I'm HIV positive. I'm going to go for a pint with, as you would, and I'll be about an hour or so. So I was shocked, but I just got busy with the kids, so that's all. And then he came home, and then the family came down to talk with us about things. That's all I remember about that day, really. We were all in shock.
And Hayden says he was it reported and set down in your witness statement that he was given to understand, whether then or at a later stage, that the prognosis was poor, perhaps 3 to 5 years.
Yes.
And it seemed like a death sentence to the two of you. Had he known that he was being tested for HIV or HTLV?
No.
Was any counselling or practical advice offered by Professor Bloom at that time?
No, I don't think so, no.
Now, in terms of when that was in 1985, just going to look at a couple of documents to try and work out when it might have been. Paul, can we have on screen, please, 2368015? We'll just look, first of all, at the first page. Go to the second half of the page, please, Paul. Because this picks up upon what you've picked up on.
It's okay. It's big.
Gaynor, about the reference to Dr. Krask and research.
Oh, right.
This is a letter from UK HCDO to Hayden. Hayden's made some queries and asked that very question. And the answer is this. The reference to Dr. Krask has puzzled us since we took over the database in 2002, since Dr. Krask was a virologist who was based in the northwest of England but is long since retired. We believe that in the late 1970s, the UK HCDO Liver Disease Working Party conducted a retrospective survey of non-A, non-B hepatitis, and that the data from this survey was kept in a file labelled Treatment Centre Code 39 Dr. Krask for the sake of convenience. Understandable, this has caused quite a lot of confusion since. The issue of consent to receive this concentrate is between you and your centre and has nothing to do with the database. But it would not have been normal to have asked for consent at that time. And this treatment antedates the first description of non-A, non-B hepatitis in patients with haemophilia by 12 months. So that's clearly something that concerned Hayden, and that's the answer he received. If we go to the next page, please, Paul. And if we look at point 5, we can see here Hayden's raised a query about the date he was told. I can only speculate, is the answer, why you were first informed of your HIV status on the 2nd of February 1985, whereas we'd been told that the date of your first positive test was the 15th of July 1984. We have a record of 2 HIV positive tests, one dated 15th of February 1985, actually taken after you were told of your status, and the other dated 15th of July 1984. This information comes from a Form G completed on the 5th of November 1987. HIV testing was not widely available until late 1984 and early 1985. Some of the better organised centres kept stored plasma samples from their patients and were therefore able to test them retrospectively when a test became available to better establish the time at which their patients had contracted the infection. It is therefore possible that the 1984 test was a retrospective test, but we have no way of knowing that for sure. That suggests in any event that Hayden may have been told on the 2nd of February 1985 of his diagnosis. And there's just one further letter, please, Paul, 2368006. This is a letter from Professor Bloom to the GP, referring to having seen Hayden in clinic. It's dated the 10th of September 1985. And in the third line it says this: I also took the opportunity to further counsel him regarding AIDS, although there is no evidence that he's developing this disorder. Just pausing there, as far as you're aware, was Hayden ever counselled by Professor Bloom about AIDS?
No, I don't know.
And then it continues, nevertheless, I have counselled him regarding the desirability of using protective measures such as barrier contraception in order to prevent transmitting the infection to his wife. I'm also arranging to test her. Now, you yourself record in your statement that you had an HIV test, as this letter suggests, in 1985,
Yes.
but that came back negative. You then, in 1987, have recorded that you had felt ill for quite a lot of that time.
Yes, we'd been on holiday and I just wasn't well at all. I'd lost a lot of weight, but I didn't go present myself a test until a year later.
In 1988. And when you were tested in 1988 for HIV, what was the outcome of that test?
It was positive. But the test in those days took a long time, like a couple of weeks. So we were going on holiday with Anne and Paul, and they wanted to tell us the result when we come back. But I said, well, we're only going to worry if we're on holiday. So we were told the day before. So we went on holiday and did our best to enjoy it.
You and Hayden had, in fact, ever since Hayden's diagnosis, used contraception, protective measures, to prevent the risk of transmission.
Yes.
From 1985 onwards. But you hadn't prior to that because you'd been sterilised in 1980.
I'd been sterilised in 1980 when I was 23, so...
And so you don't know when you were infected, but your own feeling recorded in your statement is likely to have been prior to 1985.
It could have been when the test that Hayden had in 84, there was a window of opportunity because he wasn't told early enough.
What was the effect, first of all, on Hayden of learning not only, as he had done in 1985, that he was infected with HIV, but learning in 1988 that you had been infected?
It devastated him. It really devastated him. It was the day... well, I saw a change in him from that day on. He felt guilty. He felt awful.
And you, by that time, lived with the knowledge that your husband had been infected with HIV for 3 years.
Yes.
What was the impact on you of learning that you too had been infected with that same disease?
Well, I was obviously devastated as well, but, you know, I had small children. I needed to get on with my life, and we just tried to do the best that we could, you know.
You started treatment with AZT not long after your diagnosis in 1988.
Yes.
What was the treatment like?
It was awful. But I kept on. But I think that the doses were quite high in those days. And, I mean, if you'd end up taking something, you're taking that drug, then you end up taking something to counteract the side effects, like diarrhea or sickness. So there always seemed to be something up, you know.
And did Hayden start on AZT at the same time? Because your statement has given a suggested date of 92 for his treatment.
No, I think he was later than me. Yeah.
And what side effects did Hayden experience?
Yeah, around about the same type. Yeah, same type. He was putting up with not only bleeds now, but side effects from the drugs that he was on.
Hayden was later told that he'd also been infected with hepatitis C. Now, what can you recall about how he learnt that?
I think it was casually said to him, like as if they thought he already knew. I think it was Dr. Dasani that, well, that would be the hepatitis C. Because he was having pains in his side.
And you've described in your statement that it being said in a very matter-of-fact way by Dr. Dasani. You've also recorded a comment that Hayden reported Dr. Dasani saying, possibly later, to the effect that hepatitis C will get you in the end.
Yeah.
Just in terms of again, trying to work out the dates when the hepatitis C became known and was communicated to Hayden, I'm going to put another small number of documents on the screen, Gaynor. 2368013, please, Paul. We can see here a test result. The date's not brilliant, but it is 16th of January 1991. And we can see in the bottom it says antibody to hepatitis C virus not detected. That's January 91. If we then have 2368012, we have a second test result. The date of this is the 30th of April 91, and we can see here antibody to hepatitis C virus detected, and then someone's handwritten, please repeat, seems to have seroconverted to hepatitis C, confirmation to follow. So the first record in Hayden's medical notes of a hepatitis C positive test is April 1991. Could we have on screen then, please, Paul, 2368008? We can see this is a letter from Dr. Dasani to a Dr. Smith. And if we just have the first paragraph, please. It says this: thank you for agreeing to see this 35-year-old builder with severe haemophilia A who was seroconverted for hepatitis C antibody between January 1991 and April 1991. Negative in January 1991, positive in April 1991, and then it goes on to refer to the positive HIV status. And then the second paragraph, please, Paul. He is intermittently symptomatic from his hepatitis C, and then there's a reference there to pain, doesn't have any clinical stigmata of chronic liver disease. Now, that letter doesn't say one way or another anything about Hayden knowing.
No.
If we look at 2368010, we can see a handwritten entry. It's the 29th of September 1991. The date's not clear, but that's actually clear from looking at the records in context. And we can see here, and it's been underlined in red, subsequently, jaundice, and then there's a reference to saying that he doesn't drink excessive alcohol. But no reference there in this note in September 1991 to a diagnosis of hepatitis C. And then if we have on screen, please, 2368011. This is an entry for maybe the 26th or 28th of July 1993. And if we go just over halfway down the page where it's been underlined in red, again, that's a subsequent underlining, hepatitis C discussed in detail.
Oh.
That's the first record in Hayden's notes, as far as we've been able to ascertain, of a discussion with Hayden, and that's July 1993, some 2 years after the test results.
Oh, right.
Do you have any clearer recollection of your own of when Hayden learnt that he was hepatitis C positive?
No, I don't.
What was it like for both of you living with the stigma of HIV in the 1980s and 1990s?
Well, well, we've heard about the adverts. It was awful because, well, it's just the way it was. And I wanted to protect the boys, so I didn't have stigma directed at me, I don't think. But my mother went to, she used to run the sailing club, and she went the job was available again, and she went for it. And they said she could have the job, but Gaynor and Hayden couldn't go down there. So she didn't accept the job. So my mother was directly, targeted. That was awful. But
And you decided not to tell the boys until they were
older,
late teens or young adults. You've also described in your statement how Hayden worried about the risk of infecting them. He worried about toothbrushes. He was worried about kissing and hugging them.
Yes.
He gradually became more and more ill with the infections, and that affected his ability to work.
Yes, it did. It didn't work.
And he began to realise he wasn't strong enough to keep the carpentry business going.
That's right.
And that came to an end in the early 1990s.
Yes.
You had continued working, you'd been working in retail.
Yes.
With the combination of Hayden's illness, your own infection and the care of your boys, you couldn't keep going
That's
either.
right.
And you put it this way in your statement, that as a family you went from being comfortable, not well off, but comfortable and stable, to being dependent on benefits.
Yes.
There was an occasion in 1995 when you and Hayden were both physically attacked.
Yes, yeah.
What happened?
We'd been to a barn dance, and we were coming back, and I think we were being dropped at Rummy, and I don't think they liked our singing, or so, I don't know, but someone punched Hayden, and there was a few of us there, and my family, and we went to, I had to take him to the hospital. Well, there was an ambulance, and he was, he'd had a broken nose, and he was hospitalised. So we went, my sister went to the police and said that they probably won't say anything because of the HIV. And the police got in touch with us and said, we advise you don't pursue this because the assailants could sue you for not telling them you have HIV.
In the early 2000s, Hayden started treatment for hepatitis C.
Yes.
It's interferon and ribavirin. What were the side effects of that?
Terrible. Terrible. He was totally different. He was moody, rowing with the boys. So then I'm in between sorting those problems out. It was awful. In fact, I can remember saying at one time, and I'm sorry guys, but I said to Tim, our social worker, I said, I hate him. And he said, and this, what he said, made me look at it in a different way. He said, you don't hate him, you hate the condition. And that made me look at things in a different way.
And in terms of the physical effects of the interferon, you described in your statement it caused Hayden extreme fatigue, confusion, cramps, headaches. Wasn't unusual for him. I'm sorry.
He was cold all the time. Yeah.
He'd spend much of the day in bed, which was not how he normally was.
That's not like him.
And that lasted about 6 months, but it didn't succeed in clearing the virus.
No, and we found out later that he should have been on it longer. It was a short, that 6 months, I think he should have been on it a year, really, but that was as much as he could take anyway, I think.
And after that, did he have any further treatments for hepatitis C that you can recall?
No.
You've also described him from starting to suffer from terrible cluster headaches.
Oh, yes. They just suddenly, well, the one, it just suddenly came on, and he was going out for a pint and a bet with his mate Paul, and I was driving in the car, and I had to stop straight away because this headache, he was in absolute agony and being sick. So I took him up the heath and they kept him in.
What were the mental, the psychological effects of the diagnosis, the treatments, the ill health, the inability to work on Hayden?
It was awful for him because he was a proud man and he wanted to provide for his family, and it just, well, I don't know. It was awful for him.
And for you've taken over those years and indeed continue to take various combinations of drugs for your HIV infection. And you often felt very ill. You would give yourself drug holidays
I would.
because you needed a break from them. You've described yourself experiencing debilitating migraines, nausea and vomiting.
Yes.
And also terrible depression about you both being infected.
Yeah.
Hayden started to spend more and more time researching what lay behind the infection of so many people.
It completely overtook his life. But it was nice to see. I'm in awe because he was such... he wanted to get to and find out why this happened, especially when he was hearing about children dying.
And he, as we'll hear later, Gareth was particularly affected by the death of Colin Smith.
Yes. I think that's what spurred him on.
And sometimes you'd get up in the night and he'd be on the computer in the middle of the night. Were you and he ever offered any form of psychological support or counselling?
No, I don't think so. I think the social workers seem to take that job on. Because as well, you didn't realise from one day to the next if he found something out and we could just ring up and they were always there.
You said in your statement the practical support you got was from, first of all, the social workers, who almost acted as counsellors.
Yes.
And then from the community of infected and affected people themselves, in particular in relation through the establishment of the Birch Grove Group.
Oh, yeah.
What can you tell us about that?
Well, the Birch Grove Group, I think Hayden went to the pub and they got chatting and about perhaps we ought to meet, say, once a month. So there was a card usually put up in the haemophilia centre saying about, have you been affected by HIV? Like fancy a chat and then be a date. But very often the card would be taken down. And so the phone would be going around about whoever's, make sure that card is still on. So then gradually more and more people were going to the Birch Grove. But the unfortunate thing about that is we were all getting to know each other in a social, friendly way. And then they started dying.
You and Hayden went to a lot of funerals.
We did go to a lot of funerals, yeah.
Hayden also became involved with Haemophilia Wales.
Yes.
And he became determined to get to the truth of what had happened and why people had been infected.
Yeah.
In 2000 or 2001, Hayden was notified that he'd received blood products from someone who died from VCJD.
Yes.
All that.
So now he starts researching that.
What was the effect of that information on
Well, he just, he said, whatever next.
And we'll just put one document up on screen to see one of the practical effects of it. It's 2368014, please, Paul. We can see this is a letter from an orthopaedic surgeon to Dr. Collins, the consultant haematologist by this time at the Haemophilia Centre, 6th of March 2002. As you will probably know, we were going to operate on Hayden's ankle this week, but when he attended pre-admission clinic, he divulged he'd had a letter from the government telling him that he's had exposure to blood products from someone who is known to have CJD. As a direct result of this, we have delayed his date for admission to and I've contacted a doctor's name they're given for his advice regarding theatres. You and Hayden also found it impossible to get life insurance.
Yes, that's right.
And again, we'll just look at one document, please, Gaynor. It's 2368005. And this is a letter from Allied Dunbar, 22nd of December 1987. It's addressed to a doctor. Gets Hayden's name wrong. Thank you for kindly completing the confidential report on Mr. Williams and also for examining him on our behalf. In view of the fact that Mr. Lewis is HIV antibody positive, I regret that we shall decline consideration of this application for life assurance. So just, again, pausing there, the very fact of infection was such that you couldn't obtain life insurance. And then we can see in the following paragraph this: since we're uncertain as to whether Mr. Williams again is aware of the diagnosis and we think he might be alarmed by the implications of our decision, we shall be grateful if you will get in touch with us before our decline letter is dispatched to him. The letter will, of course, not state the diagnosis, but will indicate that the decision was made on medical grounds. But there seems to be some knowledge or assumption on the part of the insurance company that patients themselves might be unaware of their HIV status, even in 1987.
Right, yeah.
Hayden began to get terrible pains in his side. And you've said in your statement he put a brave face on it, but he knew something was wrong.
Yes, yeah.
A number of scans and tests were undertaken, and what did they show?
Well, I think he had a biopsy, but he's wondered since then whether the biopsy contributed to a tumour growing there. That was found in 2008.
That he had a tumour in the liver.
Yes.
And he was referred to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Birmingham for an assessment for a liver transplant.
Yes.
And that was December 2008. And he was placed on the transplant list.
Yes.
And you've described in your statement then being on standby after that, waiting for the phone call.
It was awful. Yeah. I think once 9 o'clock in the night went by, I think we could, you can relax a little bit now. We doubt if we'll get a call. But as it happened, he did get a call at 9:30 on the 16th of March, 2009.
In the intervening period, he'd continued to experience the pain. It was getting worse, and also his stomach was swelling.
Yes. Yeah.
Having got that call in March 2009, Hayden underwent a liver transplant.
Yes.
And he began to recover.
Yeah. Oh, his surgeon?
Yes, absolutely.
His surgeon, I was surprised to see on the news a couple of years ago. He was sued for using an argon gun on his patients. And I can remember, I was in the room with Hayden, and the surgeon said, "You never know, you might have my autograph." And I remember him saying that, and I thought, that's odd, he must be a popular surgeon. And yeah, it was only a couple of years ago that I saw that he was on the news.
You've described Hayden being able to start walking, but slowly, to the local
It would
shop.
probably take us an hour to go to the shop. Yeah.
But by the autumn of 2009, the cancer aggressively returned.
He found that out himself. And I've only recently found out that they were going to do the transplant, but nothing else. What happened? Sorry, please repeat.
What your statement has recorded is that in the autumn of 2009, the cancer had aggressively returned.
Yeah, so they weren't testing him at all. They weren't, but Hayden asked the nurse to do a test for AFPs. And the only reason you'll have AFPs, well, there's two reasons. You're having twins, or you have liver cancer. Well, we knew he wasn't having twins. So he found out by his own means, by asking the nurse to do that test, that the cancer was back.
What treatment did he receive on this occasion for the cancer?
Chemoembolization. Nasty. It was awful. If he'd known what that was going to be like, I don't think he would have bothered.
By April of the following year, 2010, Hayden's health had deteriorated to the extent that he was now receiving palliative care.
Yes. That started April the 1st.
Nurses from the hospice would come to the home.
Yes.
And then later on in May 2010, he was admitted to the hospice.
Yeah.
And Hayden died on the 21st of May 2010.
Yeah.
Your son, Stephen, has described his dad in his witness statement in the following terms: hard-working, doggedly determined for justice, but also philosophical about the most polarising issues, forthright, funny, clever, humble, forever truthful, and always looking to protect those around him.
Yeah.
Is that a good description?
That's great, yeah. Well done, Steve.
You have said in your witness statement how very angry you have felt that this terrible thing has happened to you both.
Yeah.
How have the years been for you since Hayden's death?
Well, I miss him so much. I think, I don't know, I've been adjusting since, I'm still adjusting to life without him.
Just want to ask you, as the last area of questioning that I have for you, about the McFarlane Trust. Hayden had a lot of dealings over the years with the McFarlane Trust. You've described them in your statement from your own perspective as terrible to deal with, an uphill battle with obstacles in the way. And Hayden was particularly concerned that they weren't providing enough financial help and support.
That's right. There was one time when we moved to the house we're in now, there was work being done, a downstairs bathroom. We called them adaptions, but the McFarlane Trust would see it as renovations. And the council would pay so much towards the work, but there was 5,000 needed. And we asked, or Hayden asked for the money, and this was got bouncing back and forth for a couple of months, I think. And Fran rang one day and said, we've had a meeting and I'm sorry, you can't have it. And I burst into tears because I could see the work being done. It was boosting him and giving him something to get up for, you know. So I burst into tears and she said, I'll phone you back, hang on. And they changed their mind just like that. Now, what if I hadn't burst into tears? And what about all those other people that just accepted? No, they were awful.
And we're going to look at, first of all, at a letter and then at some emails. The letter is 2368009, please, Paul. This is a letter the 30th of April 1996 from the McFarlane Trust. It's addressed to Dr. Dasani. And it says this: Dear Dr. Dasani, your patient shown above has made a request to the Trust for financial assistance, which will be considered by our trustees at their meeting in 3 weeks' time. Since on present policy, single payments are almost invariably health-related, the trustees have decided that the anonymous case summaries which they receive in advance of their meetings should contain up-to-date health information gathered in a consistent fashion. To meet this aim, where the health information held on a particular patient is older than 6 months, a doctor's report will be requested. And then there's reference to how often doctors might be asked to provide reports. And then it says this: all the information contained in the completed report will be treated as given in confidence to the Trust and will not be shared with the patient concerned.
That doesn't surprise me.
Were you aware the McFarlane Trust was asking for confidential medical reports?
No.
The contents of which wouldn't be shared with you?
No.
Could we have up on screen, please, Paul, 2368016? We're going to look at some emails between Martin Harvey, Chief Executive of the McFarlane Trust, and Peter Stevens, Chair of the McFarlane.
Can I just say that before we read this,
Yeah.
and the context of this is the Hayden, I didn't get the 20,000 when the first payment, and my boys didn't get the Category G payment either. So Hayden was talking to the Trust. He didn't want a penny more or a penny less, only what was what we deserved. And this is the outcome.
And you were what the Trust termed, and the inquirers heard the phrase before in relation to other witnesses, an infected intimate.
Intimate, yeah, nice.
And we see, thank you for explaining the context, we then see what the email is. Martin, what's with these people? Funnily enough, when you set it out as you have done, it makes one wonder why infected intimates are treated exactly as registrants, since they do not have haemophilia to worry about. We might see if we can review that when we get round to looking at reg pay at the NSSC. That would be a way of pissing off the Lewis contingent. He. The second email we're going to look at is the second page, please, Paul. We'll just look at the top first of all. The context here is an email from Hayden referring to a meeting he'd attended where he'd lost his temper. And it's an email in which he says he was so angry and frustrated with the meeting, he was unable to make his point or get any sensible answers, and he lost his temper. And he says in the email at the top, "I would like to apologise to all present at the meeting." And then he says this: "I ended the matter with a statement of never writing to either the chairman or the CE again, which is a sad conclusion to the whole matter. What I'm even sadder about is that the chairman and CE don't even seem to care that one registrant has now lost faith in the honesty and integrity of those involved, and I'm left with no way of contacting the trust with any belief that what they tell me is true." And then further on he adds that you will now be dealing with the trust on behalf of both of them. And then if we can go down to the bottom email, please, I'll read it out. It's from Peter Stevens to Martin Harvey. "Martin, as I prepare to go to bed, I recall that I shall never have a private email from Hayden Lewis again. Oh, happy day. Indeed, Callooh Calais, but I've not yet discovered if you too nurse a Lewis Carroll streak. Otherwise, what a monumental waste of time. Not just this afternoon, but all the previous hours spent nurturing that lot of moaners. As," and then there's a reference to an individual, "there are some people who want to get on with their lives. However, I guess we have to persevere. Peter." The third email that you've provided to the inquiry, Gaynor, is, you turn 1, 2, 3, 4. It's the fifth page, please, Paul. We can see again the context here is an email from Hayden to Peter Stevens. I should say these emails are all from 2004. And it's an email in which Hayden sets out a number of matters that he is asking to be considered. We won't go through the detail of that. We can see the context from the email itself. Can we go to the bottom of the page, please? From Peter Stevens to Martin Harvey. "Martin, notwithstanding the heading being Private Letter Chairman MFT, I thought you'd love to join me in starting the week with an insight into the thoughts of Hayden Lewis. I shall try to compose a reply in the course of the day. I shall point out to him that I'm unable to provide him with information about expenses without asking you. It is irritating that somebody so thick can come up with such meddlesome suggestions." I should say
He spelled somebody wrong.
Spelled incorrectly.
Yeah, that's still interesting.
Those are three of the emails that you've shared with the inquiry. Sorry, Paul, could we just go back to the document? There's just one further email I want to put up. And it's the third page. Now, this is an email from Martin Harvey. It's maybe an email to Hayden. It's not clear because I don't think we have the full consecutive email exchanges. It's not specifically directed at any issues relating to Hayden, but it just says this: "Nobody will argue with the sentiment that whatever the amount of money available, registrants do not get sufficient financial support to recompense for what has happened to them, and that each and every one of them would swap their MFT involvement for a clean bill of health." And then it goes on to set out his perspective as to why they can't meet all the needs. Gaynor, before I ask you for any final observations you want to make, is there anything else specifically in relation to the McFarlane Trust and yours or Hayden's dealings with the McFarlane Trust that you wanted to add?
No.
We've got a video to play of Hayden, but before we play that, because I think you want to give him the last word today.
Yes.
Is there anything that you would like to add?
I'd just like to thank Sir Brian and the inquiry team for everything you're doing and for helping make a dream come true.
And I'll just ask Mr. Williams if there's anything. No. So we'll play the video, please, Paul.
An independent inquiry into how contaminated blood products were given to haemophiliacs in the UK has said it was a horrific human tragedy.
The report condemned the government's procrastination that led to around 5,000 NHS patients given blood which was contaminated with hepatitis C and HIV. It happened during the 70s and early 80s, and nearly 2,000 of the patients have since died.
We can speak now to Hayden Lewis, who was infected with HIV and hepatitis C. Hayden, just take us through what happened to you, where you are now.
Well, I've progressed from being told in 85 about the HIV to 94 being told about the hepatitis C, to 2001 being told that I received 6 batches of implicated VCJD blood from a victim that had passed away, and then last September I get told that due to the hepatitis C the liver is forming liver cancer and tumours are growing. So now I'm on the priority list for a transplant, basically.
Has anyone paid you any kind of compensation or accepted any kind of blame for this?
I love the way the government like to use the word compensation, because compensation implies liabilities being accepted. And to date, no haemophiliac has received any compensation whatsoever. We've been drip-fed appeasement money, basically, since 1989.
Also extraordinary in just how long they have taken to respond each step of the way.
Why should it be seen extraordinary? If somebody's guilty of something, then it isn't going to get a positive response from government. In 1991, they conceded to a moral obligation. Now, anybody who knows anything about politics, government do not concede to any moral obligation unless they think they hold a legal one. And they conceded to a moral obligation. Rod Archer's report today is just regurgitating what was reported in 91. It's just basically the same data.
So when this report says horrific human tragedy, it does not apportion blame?
No. I think he felt very conscious of the fact that because it was an unofficial inquiry, therefore he didn't have any insurance cover to being sued for what he may or may not say, that he was very careful in the words he chose. But certainly it's been a horrific sequence of events, but tragedy and disaster imply accident. I don't perceive it was ever an accident.
Tell us about your family and the sort of ramification it has had on all of you.
It's had a profound effect on me, as far as it's taken away my complete control over providing for my family. I've had to rely on the whim of government giving me charity handouts for the past 15 years, since work was just unattainable for me to continue. I mean, I'm a qualified carpenter, and that should suggest, why would a haemophiliac become a carpenter if he was really worried about cutting himself and bleeding to death? That is the whole point here. All the products that came from America were brought into this country under the premise that they were life support therapies, meaning if we didn't receive them, we would die. Incorrect. But to get them through the process of vetting, they had to be deemed as life support therapy.
You chart something that has gone on for decades now. We were talking about that, this all having started in the 70s and 80s.
1971, basically.
Yeah. Well, so however many years that is, 36, 37. Yeah. What should happen now?
I think government should swallow their pride and take their medicine and say they're sorry and deal with this properly. If they don't want to concede to any legal liability, that doesn't mean to say they can't address the matter from a legal perspective.
Because we have arrived at a point where still nothing has been sorted. I mean, in the last 2 years, you said another 30 sufferers
Another 30
have
died since I actually
started. So every year that this happens is another family.
The death rates now are greater than they were in 1990. And the haemophilic community is diminishing by 15 to 20 on average every year.
And I just wondered whether you see any sign of that change of heart, that kind of apology coming from the government, them taking their medicine.
I'm a very optimistic person, and without hope, then really you don't want to get out of bed in the morning. So I always hope that they will have a change of heart. I think we really need to say it as it is, because there's current ministers who are actually still in Parliament. Kenneth Clarke is one, for instance. He was health minister at the time, who remained silent. Well, I'm sorry, to remain silent in the knowledge of an injustice, to me, is, as far as I'm concerned, an accomplice to the whole tragedy.
Hayden, thanks so much for
You're
coming
welcome.
in. Thanks very much indeed. You had the last word, right?
Well, you don't need me to say anything to you after that, do you? Except thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And everyone, I think, will understand how important it was for your evidence to be heard.
Thank you.
We'll take a break till 11:30.
Thank you,
Half
sir.
past 11.